Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, the plot to reverse Brexit is in full swing and the media are at the helm. We've come this far, folks. Our freedom and sovereignty must be preserved at all costs, and I say that as a Remainer. My Mark Meets guest is the highly respected ex-Tory MP, Sir Gerald Howarth. We'll be talking Brexit, immigration, the economy and his lifelong admiration for the armed forces. In the big question, could smaller parties like Reform UK and Richard Tice decide the outcome of the next election? We'll debate that with Anne Widdecombe and Vince Cable. And in the news agenda with my brilliant panel, should the army step in to prevent strike chaos? Is going to the toilet a human right? And how long should an engagement be before getting married? Lots to get through. I'll see you after the headlines with Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. England have beaten Senegal 3-0 in their World Cup knockout game in Qatar and booked themselves a place in the quarter-finals. Jordan Henderson scored the first goal in the 38th minute with an assist from Jude Bellingham. Captain Harry Kane made it 2-0 just before half-time. It was his first goal of the tournament, and Bukayo Saka got the third in the 57th minute. The victory means Gareth Southgate's men move into the last 8 and will take on France on Saturday. The RMT union has rejected an 8% pay offer aimed at preventing further strikes this month. The rail delivery group had also offered to guarantee there'd be no compulsory redundancies before April 2024. However, the UK's biggest rail workers union said the deal wouldn't have protected its members' working conditions and would lead to unsafe practices. The Health Secretary is being urged to stop grandstanding and make a deal with unions ahead of NHS strikes this month. The call by former Health Secretary Stephen Dorrell comes as military personnel prepare to cover striking public sector workers. Around 2,000 troops, civil servants and other government volunteers are being trained to help limit disruption during the festive period. The head of the police watchdog has been forced to resign over an historical allegation. It's now emerged that Michael Lockwood, who has been the Director General of the Independent Office for Police Conduct since 2018, is facing a criminal investigation. The Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, says she told him to quit or face immediate suspension after learning about that probe. When he announced his resignation on Friday, he said it was for personal and domestic reasons. And preparations are well underway now for King Charles's coronation, which takes place in just 150 days. The St Edward's crown has now been removed from the Tower of London to be resized. Its relocation was kept secret until it was safely delivered. The ceremony on May the 6th is expected to be much smaller than the late Queen's coronation, around 2,000 guests expected for that instead of 8,000. On TV, online and on DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News, the People's Channel. Back now to Mark Dolan.
My thanks to Ray Addison, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. My big opinion monologue in just a moment. There are powerful forces at work to reverse Brexit. They must not prevail. We haven't come this far to give up our sovereignty now. My Mark Meets guest is the highly respected ex-Tory MP, Sir Gerald Howarth, a brilliant character, and we'll be talking Brexit, immigration, the economy, and his lifelong admiration for the armed forces. In the big question, could smaller parties like Reform UK and Richard Tice the handsome devil that he is, decide the outcome of the next election? We'll debate that with two good friends of mine, Anne Widdecombe and Vince Cable. In the news agenda with my excellent panel, should the army step in to prevent strike chaos? After a school bans trips to the bathroom during lessons, is going to the loo a human right? And how long should an engagement be before getting married? Reacting to those stories and many more are my brilliant panel of former Gurkha and best-selling author and adventurer Adrian Hayes, writer and agony aunt Hilary Freeman, and broadcaster and journalist Linda Jubilee. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show. Mark at gbnews.uk. The best bit of my show is when you get in touch. And this programme has a golden rule. Do you want to know what that rule is? Sebastian, are you ready? Is he awake? Is he in the pub? In that case, we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So for the next 2 hours, big debates, big guests, and always big opinions. Hopefully Sebastian at some point will turn up. Let's get started. Now, I may be imagining this, but it's almost like they want to reverse Brexit. Even as a Remainer, I can't help but notice the likes of the Beeb, ITV and Sky, as well as most of Fleet Street, dolefully reporting on labour shortages, inflation and supply chain issues, conveniently ignoring the pandemic, global inflation pressures, an energy crisis and Ukraine. The narrative across much of the media is that Brexit is failing. This is feeding through into polls, suggesting that a majority now believe it hasn't worked out, with buyer's remorse even among some Brexit supporters. Brexit regret surely hasn't been helped by headlines like these from across the media. How about The Guardian? The reality of Brexit is biting hard. Brexit has fueled a surge in UK food prices. Really? Brexit done this? Brexit has made Britain the sick man of Europe again. Scream The Guardian. How about this? Brexit has worsened the shortage of NHS doctors. Brexit, Brexit, Brexit. How about The Independent? Wait for this, folks. Brexit fears for toy safety, exposure to asbestos, and work accidents. All because of EU laws and a bonfire. Even the BBC have been at it. Brexit, progress on trade deals slower than promised. And last but not least, the Financial Times. Brexit and the economy, the hit has been substantially negative. And how about this corker? Keir Starmer must plot a bold route back to Europe for Britain. There they are, hiding in plain sight. They want us back in. Of course, all of this is bunkum, but why let a headline and a political agenda get in the way of the truth? There is, of course, a short to medium-term economic impact from Brexit. No one is denying that. It's a huge change to our country. It's a bumpy transition, but when it's done, it's done. And there are plenty of commentators out there who believe that most of the pain from that transition is now behind us, with the majority of companies already tooled up and prepared for a new way of doing business. In spite of these inevitable headwinds, the reality is that Brexit has been an instant success. It saw an immediate end to the payment of £2 billion a month to Brussels. Over 2 decades, that's the entire cost of the pandemic. Happy days. It's been an instant insurance policy against being a member of the United States of Europe, a country which, take my word for it, is coming. Brexit has been an instant insurance policy against being part of a single European army. Now, why would we seek to avoid that? Well, look at the EU's disastrous, hesitant and obstructive approach to the Ukraine invasion, with the likes of Germany keeping their foot on the brakes due to their reliance on Russian gas. For too long, Berlin appeased Moscow. Brexit has been an instant insurance policy against having the euro, a one-size-fits-all currency which would have been against the British national interest, not being able to set our own interest rates, for example. Brexit has been an instant success in relation to the control of our borders. Notwithstanding the current challenges in the Channel, we now decide who enters the country. And with net migration at 500,000 last year, which is wildly unsustainable, of course, well, that figure would be even higher if we weren't out of the bloc. By the way, if Britain is such an intolerant, hateful country, why did 500,000 people choose to make their lives here in one calendar year? A population the size of Liverpool. I'm so confused. Brexit was an instant success for trade deals, for the vaccine rollout, and it's an insurance policy against a devastating sovereign debt crisis on the continent, which many predict is coming. Brexit has been a success in relation to everything the public voted for. Control of our laws, our borders, our money, and our trade. And what about the economy? Look at the most recent GDP figures that we've got, as pointed out by Lord Frost, of course, the hero of Brexit, writing in The Telegraph recently. These are the figures from the OECD just 2 weeks ago, covering the period from when Brexit officially kicked in economically, which was the end of 2020. Since then, Britain has grown faster than Germany, France, Italy, Spain, or the Eurozone overall. As Lord Frost dryly points out, you won't hear that on the BBC. The Remainers are regrouping. We've even got one at number 11 in the form of China admiring Jeremy Hunt, who insiders tell me is behind the Switzerland-EU alignment story. The campaign to rejoin will ramp up in the months and years ahead. It will start with the snake oil language of frictionless trade and realignment, partnerships and agreements and all the rest of it. The media and the political establishment are seeking to reverse Brexit little by little, day by day. Salami slicing our sovereignty, it is death by 1,000 cuts. Brexit brings with it huge challenges. The Northern Ireland Protocol, which divides our country down the middle, it's got to go. And trade must be made easier, especially for smaller businesses who are struggling. And I want skilled, talented Europeans still coming to this country and making their lives here. But in the end, when the politics of all of this has washed away, and if Brexit is given a chance, it will work. After all, we buy more from the EU than we sell to them. This insuperable truth ultimately gives us the upper hand. The EU arguably need to make a success of Brexit more than we do, as failure to do so will hurt them more. Brexit is working already, and like a fine wine, it will improve with age. We've been out for 10 minutes. Give it 10 years, and we'll be laughing. Ignore the prophets of doom and the highly politicised commentators who will stop at nothing to reverse it. If we stick with Brexit, if we commit to it, we will make it a success. And I voted Remain in 2016. But I accepted the result and I chose to embrace it. So I hope I speak with some authority. What we must avoid is sleepwalking back into the bosom of Brussels. Brexit's got its knockers, but it would be a boob to go back in. What's your view? Mark at gbnews.uk. I'll get to your emails shortly, but joining me to react to my big opinion and all of the big stories from the day's news, let's speak to adventurer, author and coach Adrian Hayes, writer and agony aunt Hilary Freeman, and journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee. Linda, this is the salami slicing of our sovereignty, and we must not yield to these siren voices of return or remain.
Well, like you, Mark, I voted Remain in 2016, but actually it's a democratic vote. We have to accept it and we have to move on. I have noticed like you as well, that there are commentators in the media suggesting that it might be a good idea to somehow reverse that decision. But the fact of the matter is, it's just not going to be possible to do that anytime soon. Even if we did want to go back and we did get momentum behind that decision, it would probably take a generation to do it. It's a bit like turning around an ocean-going liner, a Williamson turn that's called, where a ship goes back on its own axis. It takes a long, long time to achieve. I listen on a daily basis to a very well-known broadcaster, mid-morning, on a radio channel, very talented broadcaster. On a daily basis, he talks about reversing on Brexit. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what journalists say, it doesn't matter what view they take. It's technically very, very difficult to do that. And quite frankly, we are committed to this path. And now that that decision has been made, I, for one, would like to stick to it.
Well, yes, and Linda, like you, as a Remainer, the logic to me is that you either do Brexit properly or not at all. You go hard or you go home. Because if you have the full-fat Brexit, which is more or less what we've got, once you've sorted out that Northern Ireland protocol, if you have a customs union, you lose the trade deals. If you have the single market, you've got free movement. I don't know how you can accept more than 500,000 people coming into the country, which is the figure from last year, after Brexit. So we either do Brexit properly or not at all.
That's very true. I think one thing that would have solved the situation slightly, and I've heard Vince Cable say this, we should actually have had a super majority where the referendum vote was concerned. That would have made our lives much, much easier going forward. But now that the decision has been made, as you say and as I say, we just have to press ahead with it. There are lots of advantages to it. And I think now that actually immigration, where the EU is concerned, is in negative territory. And after all, that is one reason why people did vote to Brexit. That's to get control of our borders. And in some respects, it has been true. We have achieved some things, but other things will take many years to actually get over the line. And we just have to accept that this is a hard thing. Wasn't it President Kennedy who once said that we're not doing it because it's easy, we're doing it because it's hard? Now, he may have been talking about the moon landings, but actually, Brexit's quite a big deal. It's not as big as a moon landing, perhaps, but you have to commit down a path. That's what we should be doing.
Hilary Freeman, this is a piss take, judging Brexit after 2 years and at the tail end of a pandemic.
Well, first of all, I'm not really sure what you mean by judging Brexit, because all the headlines that you showed before were from papers who always supported Remain and still support Remain. So it's not really that much of a surprise that The Guardian doesn't think Brexit's worked very well, because it didn't want Brexit. So I think if you had headlines from the Daily Mail saying Brexit's a disaster, that would be some sort of agenda. But actually, it's just people who believe something continuing to believe it. And I think that's fine, that's fair. And just because we have a democracy doesn't mean that we have to accept something. You know, we have a Tory government, doesn't mean that the Labour Party has to sit down and stop campaigning until the next election. People carry on wanting what they want and believing and supporting what they want to happen. So, you know, democracy means a constant discussion. But I really don't think there's a media agenda, and I do really worry about this kind of anti-MSM, this anti-mainstream media narrative that there is. I think it's dangerous because it's pitting, you know, the common man against the media, and the media, you know, it's encouraging conspiracy theories. And I really don't believe, you know, working in the mainstream media, that it's like that.
Well, I think you raise a lot of fair points, Hilary. My boss always says we are mainstream media too.
Yeah,
and I do agree with you that, and I certainly don't like this idea of enemy of the people and all of that sort of rhetoric. So you raise a fair point, and I'll grant you that. Adrian Hayes, what's your view?
Yeah, well, firstly, just take Hilary's point. I do think there is an agenda. I think journalism, mainstream media, most of the media, is on campaign journalism. The absence of the Hunter Biden laptop story in the media in the last few days is astonishing. But going back to Brexit, I said there, I agree with a lot of what you say, Mark, not all, but I said a few weeks ago on the show that, let's be honest, and a lot of GB News viewers will be Brexit supporters, but let's be actually open this. There were benefits in staying in the EU, primarily with trade, and there were benefits in leaving. Independent trade deals, sovereignty, controlling your borders. What I said a few weeks ago, and I'll say it again now, there was little point in forsaking the benefits of staying in if you don't maximise the benefits of leaving. And I don't think when you look at net migration, 500,000 per year, when you look at sovereignty, there's still 8,000 EU laws that we're subject to, apparently. and trade deals, we haven't really leveraged that. You say, well, we're not really maximising the benefits. And this is why I think the media are probably pouncing on this. They're looking at the negative side. But to me, and where I do agree with you, Mark, is if you're doing it, you've got to do it full bore. And by the way, just so your viewers are aware, I took those two things and I took the view that Brexit, the advantages of leaving were higher than the advantages of staying. I voted Brexit. However, unless we maximise those benefits, it's pointless. So I want to see politicians with some courage, which is one thing I think we can all agree on. The politicians today in power are complete cowards. And we need to leave the ECJ if we're ever going to control our borders. We need to take back sovereignty so we can control our own laws. And we need to strike up those independent trade deals.
My brilliant panel return shortly to debate whether the military should be used to tackle strike chaos in what looks to be a winter of discontent. Big Sam Allardyce live before 10 talking about England's wonderful victory. It's coming home. But next, Vince Cable and Anne Widdecombe, how the smaller parties could decide the result of the next general election. Isn't Sam's jumper gorgeous? See you in 3.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, a very big response to my big opinion monologue. There are dark forces out there trying to reverse Brexit. That was the topic of my big opinion. The emails are coming in thick and fast, mark at gbnews.uk. How about this from Derek? Mark, great show on Brexit. It would be helpful to have a government that believed in anything. Matt says, hi Mark, Hunt and Co need to get on and remove all of the red tape That's what Brexit was supposed to do and has not delivered. Next Dyson factory should be built here, not in Singapore. Wayne, evening, Mark. We, the public, know the politicians are trying to thwart Brexit. There are a handful of them, but the bigger problem is the civil service, as they are constant. And in the main, these are the ones we need to deal with. Well, look, thank you for those emails. Keep them coming. Mark at gbnews.uk. It's time now for this. Yes, it's time for the big question in which we tackle a major news story of the day. Tonight, with the Lib Dems staging something of a political comeback, and with the growing popularity of smaller parties like Richard Tice's Reform UK, and the likes of UKIP potentially diluting the votes of both the Tories and Labour in the Midlands and the north of England, could smaller parties decide the outcome of the next general election? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former Business Secretary under the coalition government and ex-Lib Dem leader, Sir Vince Cable, and former government minister, ex-Brexit Party MEP and television personality and best-selling author, Anne Widdecombe. Let me start with you, Anne. Do you think that the likes of Richard Tice could have an influence in the outcome of the next national poll?
Oh, yes. I think the emphasis there is on influence. What we do know is that in general elections, small parties just do not perform well because everybody is focused on what the two big parties are doing, and they're focused not so much on which one of those they want, but on which one of those they don't want. And they fear that if they give their vote to a small party, and we saw this even with the mighty SDP in the 1980s, once it comes to a general election, people don't want to risk a vote for a small party in case the wrong big party gets in. But your word was influence. And there, I think all you have to do is look at what the Brexit Party did in 2019, when we absolutely swept the board at the European elections, said we were going to field candidates in every seat, managed to thoroughly put the wind up the Conservative Party so that Theresa May had to go. Boris came in pledging he would get Brexit done, and the general election was fought on that. Now, that only happened because sufficient pressure was put on the Conservatives to know that if they did not get Brexit done, then they were actually going to lose support from their own members. So influence, yes. Make any impact electorally, no.
Could this rivalry from smaller right-wing parties backfire and hand the keys of number 10, Anne, to Keir Starmer, particularly in those red wall seats?
Well, I think, as I say, come a general election, people aren't going to vote for the smaller parties, be they left, right or anything else. They're going to make a choice between the two big parties. But we've got 2 years before that. And in the course of that 2 years, we've got local elections, we've got county elections, we've got all manner of electoral tests. And if the little parties start doing extremely well in those, that, as I say, is what influences the bigger parties to start taking seriously public opinion, which they don't. I mean, when they're in there, and particularly when you've got a party with an enormous majority, it doesn't have to listen to public opinion unless the public speaks so loudly that it begins to take notice, and that's what we've got to do.
Sir Vince Cable, in 2010, your party, the Liberal Democrats, had significant influence in the outcome of the general election. It took a couple of days of negotiation between Nick Clegg and David Cameron, but in the end, the Lib Dems were kingmakers in a hung parliament.
Well, it could happen again. As Anne said, under our current system, the first past the post system, it's actually rather difficult for third parties, but mine is very well organised at a grassroots level in parts of the country. I think the recent polls are suggesting that we could get around 30 seats. It may be a few more, a few less. But that order of magnitude, and that may prove to be a crucial number. But you also have to take into account the nationalists, particularly in Scotland, probably around 50 seats. So when you talk about little parties, we're talking about people in rather different situations. There's the Scottish nationalists, as in many parts of England, and then you have, UKIP, or whatever version of UKIP is going to stand, which probably won't win seats, but as Anne suggested, can significantly affect the outcome.
Indeed so. I mean, this is the huge issue. In terms of the future, Vince Cable, you told Gloria De Piero on her programme Gloria Meets, which aired earlier today, that the price of support from the Lib Dems in a hung parliament would be progress on the passing of proportional representation in this country as our electoral system.
I'm sure it would be. I mean, we didn't push this very aggressively in 2010. We got a rather weak understanding to have a referendum, a modest change in the system subject to a referendum. It wasn't a very good outcome. I think this time round, if we were in that position again, it would be to have a electoral reform. The Labour Party has already agreed in principle to do this without a referendum. It would be in their manifesto, and I think it would depend, whether they need us sufficiently to make that kind of concession. But I think there's a good possibility for the first time for many, many years this could be on the agenda. If you remember, Tony Blair was going to do this, but he had such an enormous majority, he didn't feel it was necessary, and so we got other constitutional changes, but not this. But next time round, it may well happen.
The likes, Anne, of Nigel Farage of this parish have spoken quite warmly about proportional representation. It would be good news for those on the right, such as yourself, who feel politically homeless.
No, it wouldn't. It would be appalling news. If you have proper proportional representation, then you're very unlikely ever to have an outright Conservative government again. Very unlikely. What you get with proportional representation is generally the outcome is a coalition. You get coalitions. Now, one of the litmus tests of democracy, and by the way, the reason I haven't joined the Reform Party and never did is precisely because of this issue. It believes in proportional representation, and I don't. But what I was saying was a litmus test of democracy is whether you can dismiss an unsatisfactory government on a convincing scale. And that is what happened to Labour in 79, to the Tories in 97. The public said, enough. You try doing that with proportional representation. And the other thing, and it's a subsidiary issue, but nevertheless it's there, is that I believe very strongly one member, one seat. So there's no doubt at all about who represents a constituency when there's a big problem.
You're shaking your head, Sir Vince.
Yes, there are models of electoral reform which deal with both of Anne's concerns. Something like the German system, which is a constituency base but with additional members, still has local members of parliament, and it also has changes of government. We had one a few months ago, and the Christian Democrats left office, and the Social Democrats and their coalition partners came in. So you can have renewal through that system. The same happens in Ireland, which is a much more proportional system. There are good models and less good models, and when Tony Blair set up an investigation under Roy Jenkins as to what would be the optimal system in the UK, we opted for something a bit like the German or possibly the Scottish system, which does allow for change and does have local representation.
Yes, we just lost the line to Anne, but we'll get it back. What do you feel about the progress of the Lib Dems at the moment, Sir Vince? Do you think that they will be a force to be reckoned with in 2 years' time?
I think so, yes. We've had very good progress in by-elections, and I think more important in building up the local government base, which used to be extremely strong, and has certainly now recovered in what you could call Tory-facing areas, less so in the Labour-run big cities, which we used to run, the Newcastle, Sheffield, Liverpool, and the rest of them. But no, the base is recovering. There is a a very professional targeting at resources to seats that we can win with the help of tactical voting. And I think we will come back as a much stronger force. I would like to see a stronger national message. That isn't clear at the moment, particularly support for Europe. No, obviously different from you, but that's how I would like us to be positioned. And probably highlighting one or two key areas like additional tax-raised revenue for education. I would have thought with a couple of big national themes of that kind, we would be in a much stronger position.
Briefly, Anne, the clock's against us. I don't want to get in trouble with Holly. There is a concern for Conservatives at the next election that the red wall goes back to Labour and that chunks of the blue wall go to the Lib Dems.
As I say, there are 2 years to go, but what I would say to Vince Cable is this: yes, please run in the general election on the basis of going back into Europe. Please do. That will guarantee you won't get anywhere at all. Please do. Please do. I'd love you to do that.
There we are. Vince Cable challenges that position. He's not talking about reversing Brexit, although many might not like the language deployed.
What's he talking about?
There we are. Well, look, Anne,
we're
thank you very much.
talking about closer to Europe. That's what he's talking about, undermining Brexit. That's what he's talking about.
The issue of rejoining is an issue for decades ahead. It's not on the agenda.
OK, decades ahead, but still on the cards. May I... It's all kicked off between two political legends. My thanks to Anne Widdecombe and Sir Vince Cable. Brilliant to have both of you on the show. We asked you on Twitter, could smaller parties decide the next election? Almost 70% said yes, 30.4% said no. Lots more to come. It is coming home, so big Sam Allardyce before 10, celebrating England's victory against Senegal. And what do you think about the military being used to avert strike chaos? See you shortly.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. My Mark Meets guest is the legendary former Tory MP, Sir Gerald Howarth. What a character. He's live in the studio. And by the way, it's coming home. It's coming home. Congratulations to England. And we'll speak to former England manager Big Sam Allardyce before 10. And let me tell you, he's modelling a Christmas jumper. We'll find out more shortly as to why. Reacting to the big stories of the day, we've got my all-star panel of adventurer, author and coach Adrian Hayes, writer and agony aunt Hilary Freeman, and journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee. Now, the government is considering deploying the army to help ease possible strike disruption over Christmas. The government have said that military personnel, civil servants and volunteers are being trained to support a range of services, including border force at airports and ports. Amid fears of Christmas chaos, there's also talk of the military going into hospitals as well. A statement from Number 10 said the decision on whether troops would be deployed was yet to be taken, but that personnel are part of the range of options available should strike action in these areas go ahead as planned. So, is using the army the best way to prevent a winter of discontent, or a step too far in terms of the remit of our armed forces? Well, who better to ask than ex-Gurkha military hero? I know you don't like being called that because you're modest. Adrian Hayes, what do you think? Is this a step too far for the military?
Well, thanks, Mark. I mean, I left the army back in the Korean War. So that's not okay. But look, I've always taken the view that the military are highly skilled people. We can do anything, and the troops can do it. And they'll do it with the great vigour, the great complete efficiency that we require. The only caution I've got is the military and all around RAF, Navy and Army is one of the few institutions that has that public respect still. In fact, it's probably the only institution we have in the UK. And you don't want to be doing anything that undermines that. If the public starts to turn against the military, I think you're on a slightly dodgy ground. The second issue, of course, is that successive politicians of all parties have sent our troops into wars here, wars there, and yet we keep reducing the numbers. The two does not match. You either do it, you either cut the military and you just stop all these wars in foreign places, or you have to boost the numbers up. And I'd obviously say we need to boost it up.
How do those working in the military feel about being deployed in a civilian setting? Are they okay with it?
Well, my colleagues I know are okay with it. As I said, providing they're not doing something that feels like it's against the public, and I don't think perhaps these cases will. Could
they be insulted if they're sort of cleaning bedpans in a hospital ward?
They'll do what they're ordered to do, and they'll do it with, as I say, the service and diligence that military people do.
Linda, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the last time the army did intervene when there was strike action. Do you remember the Green Goddesses that went in when the fire services were? And so they've done it before, it's happened before. And at the end of the day, we're talking about essential workers that are going to go on strike. And whatever you feel about the rights and wrongs of them going on strike, you cannot have no safety net, you cannot have no plan B. And the only organisations that can possibly provide that safety net are the armed forces. And I think if they have to do it, they'll be brilliant. You've heard John Healey, the Shadow Defence Secretary, saying this is not a good idea because, as Adrian was saying, numbers are very, very low in the army now. They're the lowest they've been for hundreds of years. But at the end of the day, John Healey is scoring party political points, I feel. He doesn't have a background in the military. Ben Wallace does, and he seems happy with this as a possible plan B.
Yeah, how do you think this will go down with the public if you're sort of walking down the street and you see soldiers outside a hospital?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me feel very uncomfortable. You know, I don't know if I want to see soldiers outside the hospital. I don't want, you know, I don't want soldiers being my postman. Soldiers in areas where you need security, that's one thing. But, you know, there's a kind of a fine line between having the army on the streets helping out and the army on the streets kind of keeping us all in line and feeling a bit like we're living in a kind of under martial law or something.
But we were using the COVID pandemic military.
Yeah, I mean, there is a perception, isn't there, of those in the military that it's just about having a rifle and killing people, whereas it's a very broad skill base that the military have.
You know, Linda, remember, I mean, we weren't allowed to wear uniform in the streets in the Northern Ireland Troubles in that era, but now it's encouraged, and we see military far more than we do, uniforms far more than we used to.
And also, some of the finest medics in this country are in the army.
And that's a good point. But, however, Hilary, I wonder, are there any politics to this? Is it about the optics? Is this the government's way of saying, sod you, we're putting the army in?
Well, yes. And, you know, the problem is, you know, underneath all of this, we've got a shortage of doctors and nurses before they strike. We've got a shortage of soldiers. We've got, you know, everybody striking all at the same time. You know, the government is losing control of the whole public sector, and that is the issue.
Too right. We will return to this. Don't forget, we've got the papers live and uninterrupted at exactly 10:30. You can set your watch to it. But England have beaten Senegal, and we will speak to the former England manager, Big Sam Allardyce, next.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Wonderful news. It's coming home. It's coming home. England has beaten Senegal, a 3-0 win. They absolutely smashed them. They will be playing France in the quarter-finals. I don't want to jinx it, but it could be coming home. Let me take you up to date with some developing stories, though. Reports say that one of the England players, Raheem Sterling, has left the England World Cup squad in Qatar after a break-in that occurred at his home in London whilst his family were actually at home. Also, the FA revealed that Ben White left the England World Cup camp early and he didn't get to play for a single second at the tournament. So, two stories there. Of course, our best wishes go out to Raheem Sterling and his family for what looks to be a very, very upsetting situation. Let's get the views now to this wonderful news of England through to the quarterfinals. One of the best and most successful managers of his generation, Big Sam Allardyce. Hi, Sam.
How are you?
Sam, great to have you on the show again. A resounding victory, a big vote of confidence in this team.
Oh, absolutely. Apart from the first 35 minutes where we had to rely on Jordan Pickford to keep us in the game and not go a goal down with some fantastic saves. I think that England then took control, particularly when the first goal went in. And I'm really impressed with the quality again of England's goals tonight. The 3 goals were a lot like the first game against Iran. Quality football, quick, precise football, going through the lines as quickly as possible, and some excellent finishing at the end of all that. So it was a very comfortable victory in the end. And of course, like I said, we needed Mr. Pickford to begin with, and then after that, it was easy pickings with Senegal. Of course, nothing's ever easy, but it looked easy tonight in the end.
What are your thoughts about the next round?
My thoughts about the next round: if you beat France, you'll win the World Cup. I think it'll give England that much confidence. I watched France today, and this will be their toughest test, and Gareth's toughest test, I think, since he's been manager of the England team, because they were very, very comfortable. And, of course, Mbappe particularly is... we have some really outstanding players, but this lad is right up there with the very, very best. So we need to pay special attention to him. And, of course, Giroud was the leading goal scorer in France at international level. In the box, we need to take care of him. So defensively, we'll be tested more than ever before. But certainly France will have a lot to worry about with the form of our front play at the moment.
Which is the more talented team, England or France?
Wow, that's a very, very good question. I've always said that England have the most talented squad. I think that's certain from my point of view. And I think at this moment in time, they've got right up there along with France. And of course, we still can't rule out Brazil and Argentina yet, but certainly we're right up there with those.
Oh, well, that's certainly got to be a hope. And listen, Senegal are not a team without class, without pedigree, Sam.
Not at all. I mean, most of their players play throughout Europe and quite a few in the Premier League, of course. So I had my old player El Hadj Diouf onto me this week saying that they were going to beat England, like you mean, because he played for me at Bolton. But obviously we put them to rest pretty easily in the end, and with a very comfortable victory, a very impressive performance. So it's all guns blazing for us. We've rode the criticism, or Gareth and the lads have rode the criticism after the USA, and are beginning to come into better and better form. And I think the unity of the squad, you know, when you look at the celebration of the goals and how these lads seem to be getting on together, I think that can help in terms of pushing forward the mentality and hopefully go as far as we possibly can all the way to the final.
Sam, you've managed at the very highest level. You've delivered for so many clubs. You're used to getting teams ready for big games and big finals. So how would you be preparing England right now off the back of tonight's performance?
This will be physically. They don't need anything. I think they're right there, right to that level. Recovery time first and foremost, and then it's straight into tactics. Tactically, Gareth has to pick the best team to face France. That's to make maybe changes again. I think he's started to utilise the squad brilliantly. Certainly that proven the right thing to do tonight. So I think tactically you'll see a different approach to England and maybe 1 or 2 changes. So they need to obviously stop the most dangerous players French have, but also go all out to try and expose France's weaknesses. And that will be on the training ground or in the analysis room looking at the strengths and weaknesses of France and doing a little bit of practice to get together on how they're going to play against them.
Now, as you'll have heard in my introduction, Big Sam, there are reports, it's a developing story, that one of the England players, Raheem Sterling, has left the squad in Qatar. He's left the camp after a break-in that occurred at his London home whilst his family, we're told, were at home. A very, very worrying situation. Of course, I think you'll join me in wishing his family the best in handling that situation. What will that do to the camp? And, of course, that will be a nightmare for Raheem himself.
Well, I think they will all try and get behind him, send messages, hope he's and wishing him well and his family well. Obviously, it's extremely upsetting because it only comes round once every 4 years, the World Cup, and for him to leave the squad now. But, of course, family is the most important thing. And, of course, things like this seem to be happening on a more regular basis. Burglaries with family members in the house is extremely worrying, going all across the country at the moment. So I hope they catch whoever's did it. But I certainly, first and foremost, hope that Raheem Sterling's family is okay.
Now, Big Sam, you're in very, very fine fettle. You're still a young man. I'm certain you've got another big job in you if you wanted it in football. But in the meantime, you've got a little bit of a side hustle. Holly, let's have a look.
Do you like it?
This rather handsome devil, right? David Gandy, eat your heart out. Big Sam in a big Christmas jumper. Tell me more.
Well, that's an advert I've done for George, the Asda chain, of course. And I think that for me, it shows that you can get some very good gear at a very, very reasonable price for Christmas. And that's why I actually did the advert, to coincide with the World Cup. But the quality of the gear and the prices run along with most people's budgets, when I think that's very important with Christmas coming up. So go and get your gear from George.
I completely agree. I love me a bit of George at Asda. I've got to say, other supermarkets and clothing stores are available, but only one of them's got the exclusive services of Big Sam Allardyce, a proven winner. Briefly, Sam, what would it mean for the country if we could go all the way?
It would be historic, Mark, because we've got the girls, the women's football team, winning the Euros, and if we can turn that around to the men's getting to the World Cup final and actually winning it, it will be groundbreaking. The best time we've had in football since '66, of course.
Yeah, too right. Big Sam, a thrill to have you on the show. Always a privilege. Enjoy the next game, and I hope we get to catch up following another England victory against France. Football legend.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Mark.
Sam Allardyce. There you go. And what a great model he is. Holly, can we have a look at that? What a fine figure of a man Big Sam Allardyce is, rocking his George at Asda sweater. I'd better be nice about Sainsbury's as well. They're very good. Marks and Spencer's. Come on, next. It's all happening. Even Primark have their moments. At least some. Do you know what? This? No, it's Top Man. There you go. I think I'm too old for Top Man, but anyway, I'll let you decide. Listen, lots more to come. My Mark Meets guest is in the studio, Tory legend Sir Gerald Howarth. But next, I'll be dealing with the BBC, who are going to dumb down their output for working class people. You couldn't make it up. We're back in a couple of minutes. I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
It's 10 o'clock and this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10 in just a moment, I'll be dealing with the BBC, who are going to dumb down programming in a bid to attract more viewers. Do they think we're stupid? My Mark Meets guest is the highly respected ex-Tory MP, Sir Gerald Howarth. We'll be talking Brexit, immigration, the economy and his lifelong admiration for the armed forces. In the news agenda with my first-class panel, is going to the toilet a human right? This is after pupils at one particular school have been banned from going to the loo during class time. Also, how long should an engagement be before getting married? Does it get to a point, 3 or 4 years? Gets a bit rude. Also, following the announcement of Indiana Jones 5, what is the greatest film franchise of all time? We wanted to do that on Friday, we're doing it tonight. Plus tomorrow's papers at exactly 10:30. But after this, I'm sorting out the BBC. But first, Ray Addison.
Thanks, Mark. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. England have beaten Senegal 3-0 in their World Cup knockout game in Qatar, booking themselves a place in the quarter-finals. Jordan Henderson scored the first goal in the 38th minute with an assist from Jude Bellingham. Captain Harry Kane then made it 2-0 just before half-time. It was his very first goal of the tournament. And Bukayo Saka got the third in the 57th minute. Victory means Gareth Southgate's men move into the last 8 and will take on defending champions France on Saturday. The Transport Secretary says a decision by the RMT union to reject an 8% pay offer is incredibly disappointing and unfair to the public. The rail delivery group had offered the pay rise along with a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies before April 2024. However, the UK's biggest rail workers union said the deal wouldn't protect its members and would lead to unsafe practices. Mark Harper says the RMT should put that offer to its members and call off planned strikes. The Health Secretary is being urged to stop grandstanding and make a deal with unions ahead of NHS strikes this month. The call by former Health Secretary Stephen Dorrell comes as military personnel prepare to cover striking public sector workers. Around 2,000 troops, civil servants and other government volunteers are being trained to help limit disruption during the festive period. The head of the police watchdog has been forced to resign over an historical allegation. It's now emerged that Michael Lockwood, who's been Director General of the Independent Office for Police Conduct since 2018, is facing a criminal investigation. The Home Secretary says she told him to quit or face immediate suspension after learning about that probe. When he announced his resignation on Friday, he said it was for personal and domestic reasons. Preparations are well underway now for King Charles's coronation, which takes place in just 150 days. The St Edward's crown has now been removed from the Tower of London to be resized. Its relocation was kept secret until it was safely delivered. Ceremony on May the 6th is expected to be much smaller than the late Queen's coronation. Around 2,000 guests expected there instead of 8,000. On TV, online and on DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Back now to Mark Dolan.
My thanks to the brilliant Ray Addison, who always knows where the back of the net is. It's coming home. It's coming home. Yes, folks, England are through to the quarterfinals of the World Cup. This is not a drill. They're playing France in the next round. Big Sam Allardyce, good friend of the show, thinks they can win. We'll be celebrating this great victory in the course of the next hour with my panel, and it will feature in the papers at exactly 10:30 sharp. This is Mark Dolan tonight. Big stories, big guests, and always big opinions. My take at 10 in just a moment, and the BBC, who are dumbing down to attract viewers. My response is on its way. In the news agenda with my panel, after a school bans loo visits during lessons, is going to the toilet a human right? How long should an engagement be before getting married? And following the announcement of Indiana Jones 5, what is the greatest film series of all time? Plus, as I said, we've got tomorrow's papers at 10:30 sharp, and there are some big political stories in the offing. My Mark Meets guest is the highly respected ex-Tory MP Sir Gerald Howarth. We'll talk Brexit, immigration, the economy, and his lifelong admiration for the armed forces. Lots to get through, but first, let's sort out the BBC. The national state broadcaster, the BBC, is in the news again. It is seeking to dumb down its content to accommodate what's been described as a dwindling working-class audience. How will they do this? By commissioning what can only be described as shows for thickos, or something they're calling light dramas, whatever the hell they are, and more competition formats and sports documentaries. Do they think we're stupid? The answer is probably yes, they do. And notwithstanding its shameless campaign against Brexit during the referendum, notwithstanding its one-note coverage of COVID, which characterised it as the bubonic plague, and which supported the narrative that we needed masks and had to lock down, notwithstanding its use of EastEnders storylines to push the vaccine, notwithstanding its palpable anti-Boris narrative since his election in 2019, notwithstanding its woke takeover of programmes like Doctor Who, which has become a tedious finger-wagging platform for social propaganda, the BBC is to plumb further depths by making cheap telly for dunces, or at least that's how they see them. Now, the Beeb generates almost £4 billion a year from the licence fee, which somehow they try to frame as good value for money. Do me a favour. Here at GB News, we have a 7-days-a-week operation, which has a budget which would barely keep Gary Lineker in gold cufflinks. The money that pays for this network is loose change that the Beeb could find down the back of their sofa. Now, the BBC has a great legacy and some great programmes. I don't want to axe it. We have invested in the BBC for years, and it has produced some of the greatest drama, sporting coverage, documentaries, comedies and music programmes that the world has ever seen. Radio 4, 5 Live, much of BBC local radio, great products. Love Attenborough, love Koonsberg, love Graham Norton. Dare I say it, I love the BBC, but I don't love its management. I don't love its political bias, and I don't love its funding model. No longer can it be justified to threaten cash-strapped pensioners with jail for not forking out 160 quid a year, much of which gets splurged on overpaid talent who wouldn't get anything like the deal they're on anywhere else. The Beeb may have moved much of their operation to Salford, which was a good decision, but unfortunately it hasn't changed the mentality, which is firmly rooted in North London. The Beeb can be a great success because it has a great history, but it needs to become the British Broadcasting Corporation again, representing the whole of Britain. Yes, its diverse culture, but also its diverse values, its diverse politics, its diverse tastes, its diverse opinions. And it would be helpful if its presenters didn't sneer or giggle every time someone appeared in front of the Union flag. And it would be helpful if they didn't scrap things like Land of Hope and Glory from last night of the proms, creating the impression that the British Broadcasting Corporation doesn't actually like Britain. The BBC, in my view, must stay, but it needs to deliver more bang for its buck, ditch the partisan coverage, the virtue signalling and the finger-wagging, and just inform, educate and entertain. And it could do that, in my view, on a fraction of the current budget. I think that the licence fee is no longer fit for purpose. It's got to go. When I recently explained to my teenage son that we all pay a special tax to watch the telly, he laughed. He couldn't believe me. So a fairer, more accountable way to pay for the BBC must be found too. At the moment, the Beeb is squirting out a warm flow of risk-averse, patronising, bland, box-ticking, uncreative televisual diarrhea. And it doesn't come cheap. Right now, the way it's going, the corporation that gave us Pointless is becoming increasingly pointless itself. BBC, you are the weakest link. Goodbye. Reacting to that and all the big stories of the day is my all-star panel: adventurer, author and coach Adrian Hayes, writer and agony aunt Hilary Freeman, and journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee. Great to have all three of you with me. Linda, what do you think about this? The BBC must stay, but it must change.
I think what I find really disturbing about that Guardian headline is that it has to bring in lighter programmes for poorer people. The implication being that poorer people may not have the brain power to deal with heavier programmes. Now, I agree that there should be some lighter programmes. At ITV, we used to call them programmes for the early evening viewer. That was code for lighter programmes. There's nothing wrong with that. That's an entirely separate argument, though, for the licence fee. I think it's totally unfair to have a licence fee these days to watch television where the revenue goes to one broadcaster and only one broadcaster. That's very, very unfair. The BBC is an exceptional programme maker and it's got a very strong commercial arm. It should be able to exist on its own commercial merits and not charge the licence fee. That's wrong. I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with doing lighter television, but to characterise it as doing lighter television for poorer people, well, that's being snobbish.
I also think, Hilary Freeman, it's an insult to viewers. I think that everybody just wants good telly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I don't get this correlation between poor people and stupid people, or you know, working class people and stupid people. That's just, you know, it doesn't exist. Some of the most intelligent people I've ever met have been working class, and some of the most stupid people I've met have been, you know, to private school. So it just doesn't make sense. And I'm not sure that that's the market that they really need to get. I think the problem for the BBC is the younger viewers aren't watching the BBC. The younger viewers aren't watching television anymore. And that's going to be the problem in the future. And that's also going to be the problem with the licence fee, because why are young people going to pay for a licence fee when they don't watch the BBC at all? And they watch everything on computers.
Hilary, you're a parent, aren't you?
I am.
Yeah. How old is your offspring?
She's 7.
She's 7. So I suppose when she's older, like with my son, when you explain what the licence fee is, she'll be scratching her head, won't she?
Quite possibly, yes. I mean, she's probably not typical because she's the only person who reads the newspaper on the tube. So she's a bit of an odd 7-year-old.
Well, what she is, she's a little genius, just like her rather clever and brilliant mum. By the way, we always get a ratings bump when you are on. It's the Freeman magic, folks. We don't dumb down, we don't dumb up. We have a daily meeting with Holly, with Mescana, with Abby, with Rebecca. Bloody hell, I better not forget anybody. There's a massive list of brilliant people. I can't name all of them. And we work bloody hard to choose the most compelling and interesting and entertaining stories, and the stories that we think are important. We get it right, we get it wrong, but we're thinking about the whole audience, and that's what the Beeb needs to do, Adrian.
Yeah, look, I want to take your monologue in two parts, Mark. I mean, firstly, BBC News. And to be fair to BBC, it's not just BBC, it's ITV, it's Sky, it's Channel 4 as well. I've had a huge problem with TV news over the past decades or so because it's now, apart from the campaign journalism I said earlier about the one narrative, the lack of critical thinking, it's become more about the reporters. You know, there's a story from Inner Mongolia and we've got a reporter in a flak jacket and helmets and, you know, battling the Taliban or whatever like this. And also a job loss in a factory. We've got to go in the living room of Bill and Jen and we've got to have 3 minutes of what they feel it's going to be like, you know, losing their job. That's all great, but it's all a bit of a dumbed down side of things. I want the news channels to give us the news, many more stories, not just 5 decided stories to fill the news programme. On the light entertainment side, I would agree what Hilary and Linda said. Look, I've got a daughter as well. She never watched the BBC, and I think the BBC have got to come to recognise the changing times we're in. Children, kids, and even adults, we don't watch light entertainment now. What I would watch the BBC for? Sport, documentaries, and not the news. But that's perhaps they wanted to just concentrate on those things. Maybe get rid of BBC Two and just have one channel as a news and documentary and sport channel.
Oh, no.
I certainly don't want to axe the BBC. Like I said, we actually are all shareholders in the Beeb. We've invested in it. It's got a great heritage, great pedigree. And I want it to do well because I like the rivalry. I like a challenge. Bring it on. GB News, the Beeb, the ultimate battle, the underdog versus the Goliath. And look, we're making strides, all thanks to you. If you're enjoying the programme, if you're enjoying the channel, tell your friends, tell your family, and let's change the world together. And by the way, this programme costs you nout, which is why I haven't had a haircut in a couple of years. Right, lots to get through. Next up, live in the studio, rather legendary figure in the Tory party, Sir Gerald Howarth. We'll be talking Brexit, we'll be talking Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, does he rate him, the migrant crisis, and much, much more. And don't forget, we've got the papers at 10:30 sharp. You can set your watch to it. See you shortly.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. At exactly 10:30 sharp, we've got tomorrow's papers. You can set your watch to it with full panel reactions, some very big stories that are breaking as we speak. We'll bring you more on that shortly, but it's time now for Mark Meets, in which I speak to the biggest names in the world of politics, sport, showbiz and beyond. Tonight, Sir Gerald Howarth, former Conservative MP from 1983 to 2017, representing Aldershot and previously Cannock and Burntwood. Sir Gerald was the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Ministry of Defence, as Minister for International Security Strategy, and is chairman of the pro-market, pro-freedom campaigning group Conservative Way Forward. Not dissimilar to the other group that he's part of, No Turning Back. As a lifelong Brexiteer in 2016, he joined the political board, the advisory board of Leave Means Leave, and particularly passionate about the plight of the British Armed Forces, Sir Gerald is a qualified pilot. He was commissioned into the Royal Air Force Volunteer Reserve as an acting pilot officer in 1968. 20 years later, in 1988, he received the Britannia Airways Parliamentary Pilot of the Year award. Well, he's come back down to earth since leaving Parliament in 2017, and this highly experienced and respected politician has plenty to say about the challenges facing this country. I'm delighted to say that Sir Gerald Howarth joins me now. Sir Gerald, welcome to the studio.
Mark, thank you very much indeed for having me.
Lovely to have you on the programme. Conservative Way Forward.
Yes, I'm president now in the stead of Margaret Thatcher, and handed over the chairmanship, first of all, to James Cleverly, who's now Foreign Secretary, of course.
Well, there you go. Also great pedigree. And as you mentioned, Margaret Thatcher, the founding president. And how far away do you think has the Conservative Party gone from her original vision?
Well, I think we're in different circumstances from those that prevailed when she came into office in 1979. Of course, Britain was in terminal decline post-war. We had become a socialist country, even under Conservative governments. And, of course, she revolutionised that, partly with the help of the No Turning Back group. We were a bunch of young members of Parliament who'd just come in 83, swept in on the back of the extraordinary Falklands campaign and the popularity of Margaret Thatcher.
So who were the No Turning Back group and what was the philosophy?
Well, it was people like Michael Fallon, Michael Forsyth, who's now in the House of Lords as the chairman of the Association of Conservative Peers, Neil Hamilton, Edward Lee, Angela Rumbold, who's no longer with us, and
talented people,
and people like that, and Angus Maude, not Angus Maude, his son Francis Maude, who's now in the House of Lords. But I think there is a need for a vision today. Obviously, we've had two very big hits. First hit was COVID, caused by this Chinese plague, and that resulted in lockdowns around the world, which meant a loss of production, so that the cost of that which was being produced and is today being produced is so much more expensive. And it's also, I think, had quite an adverse effect on people's way of life. People now want to work from home. We have young people talking about work-life balance. When I was leaving university and looking for a job, I did not understand the expression work-life balance. You just went out and did some work. Yes. And so there's all that. And the second thing, of course, is the Ukraine war, which has resulted in the extraordinary increase in fuel prices, which affects everything else. And that is what's fed into the cost of living crisis. And I do think it's unfortunate ministers are not setting out to the British people, and particularly those who are seeking to go on strike because they want more money. Understandably, they want more money. But the cost of living crisis is not within the control of the government, because it is these external factors which have driven up prices. And good news is, of course, Boris Johnson led the way in the West dealing with Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine, because that's got to be resolved. Ukraine produces 60 million tons of grain per annum. And I was talking to a Ukrainian member of parliament a couple of months ago, and she was telling me that this year it's reduced by half. So we've had those adverse factors, but what I think that we've got to do is to look back at what Margaret Thatcher did. And what she did was to encourage enterprise. And I fear that there's too much in the Treasury, which is saying, yes, we've got to balance the budget. Understand that. We came into government in 2010 with David Cameron, and we inherited a budget deficit of £160 billion that year. And George Osborne, new Chancellor Exchequer, had to deal with that. But I think we do need an enterprise economy. We need a growth economy. And I think putting up capital taxes is not the way to do it.
Were you closer to Liz Truss than Jeremy Hunt when it comes to how to navigate a way forward for the economy?
I did feel that we should seize that opportunity. Of course, there are risks, but everybody said these tax cuts were unfunded. Well, tell me about where the cost of COVID came from. That was £440 billion. Pretty well 3 times what the budget deficit that we inherited from Gordon Brown.
And as I pointed out on this show in 1 or 2 debates with other guests, is that, and actually the IMF have admitted this, that because we are now going to be raising taxes, we will have a longer and deeper recession.
Well, it looks like that to me, and I think that we've got to get away from Treasury orthodoxy. There's a very interesting story in the paper, I think yesterday, which was that our young people who want to pursue careers in medicine cannot get places at medical schools. 3 new medical schools have been set up with the express purpose of teaching foreigners, not British people. And the reason is, apparently, because the Treasury will not fund places for our young people to study medicine in this country. We're short of doctors, we're short of nurses. Jeremy Hunt understood that when he was Health Secretary. He did more about it then. We need to have the Treasury funding places for British people to pursue careers in medicine. That's what the nation needs.
Can't argue with that. Another headache for Rishi Sunak is the migrant crisis.
Yes.
Illegal crossings, and it's up to 1,000 a day when the weather's good enough. How does he stop this from happening? Because I think that in a couple of years' time, when he goes to the polls, this could be a deciding factor.
You're absolutely right, Mark. This is a critical factor. And we have added to the population of this country something like between 7 and 10 million people since the millennium in the last 20 years. Well, it's unsustainable.
6 million in the last decade and 500,000 last year, which is a population the size of Liverpool.
Absolutely. And something like 700,000 incomers registering for GP surgeries. The system cannot cope. And 1 new house has to be built every 5 minutes in order to accommodate the increase in population. People say we need to build new houses. Why do we need to build new houses? That is because the new migrants coming to this country have got to be housed. And I talked regularly to Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary. She was beside herself with frustration at trying to get something done. The European Court of Justice is not helpful. The European Court of Human Rights, I'm sorry, which of course was designed to stop a repetition of the Holocaust, wasn't designed to stop us dealing with our own border problems. We have the courts who are not helpful. We have a massive sort of migrants legal business acting to try to help every single migrant coming to this country. And it is a major issue for Britain, and it's changing the nature of our country. One of those, I'm afraid to say, we saw what happened to Lady Susan Hussey, a lady of exceptional character who had given 60 years of devoted service to our late magnificent sovereign. And I thought that her treatment by a woman who it would appear certainly had no time for the royal family and may well have gone to Buckingham Palace in order to cause some problems. And that is a sort of demonstration of what we're having in our country. And then we see people coming here and telling us to pull down our statues and rewrite our history. Not acceptable. What do? Well, first of all, the illegal migrants, we turn them back in the Channel. We don't have the border farce escorting them into Dover. We send them back to France, whence they came, a safe country. Secondly, something like 1.4 million visas were issued last year. We can't keep doing that. Yes, of course, we need some help. But we've got 5 million people in this country who are on out-of-work benefits. They need to be put to work. And my son-in-law, James Cartledge, who is now Exchequer Secretary at the Treasury, understands these matters. And if he's watching tonight, James, get on with it and let's get some of those 5 million people on out-of-work benefits, let's get them back into the economy.
I tell you what, the spirit of Thatcher lives on through your wise words, and you're certainly a loss to Parliament. But I do hope that you'll join us again here on Mark Dolan tonight. We have a show on Fridays, and it's 8 till 11, and I have a range of friends in the first hour. Would you come back?
I'd certainly love to, Mark.
Look forward to it. Sir Gerald Howarth,
Thank
what
you
a
very much
fascinating
indeed.
conversation. Your reaction to what Sir Gerald has had to say, Mark at gbnews.uk. The papers next.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's just gone 10:30. It's time now for the papers. As always at 10:30 every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. And let us start with The Guardian, and they are leading with the following. Sicker and poorer report reveals Britain's widening health divide. People in Britain are getting sicker and poorer with a gaping health and wealth divide between regions that's getting worse. Economic inactivity because of sickness is at its highest level since records began, with 2.5 million working-age adults inactive because of their poor health. The government's levelling up agenda is being critically undermined, the report says, as the new data shows sickness is twice as likely to force people out of work in the northeast of England, Wales and Northern Ireland as in London and the southeast of England. Labour said the report's findings were devastating. Anger at Tory claim that strikes aid Putin. Tory party chairman Nadim Zahawi has been accused of insulting NHS workers with a ludicrous suggestion that it's the wrong time to strike over low pay because it would help Vladimir Putin divide the West. Zahawi told broadcasters that nurses should call off their strikes and abandon their pay demands because it risked playing into the hands of the Russian president, who he said wanted to fuel inflation in the West. 3 and easy, England see off Senegal. In a World Cup that has teased and confounded expectations, England march mercilessly on. A familiar blend of the Stakhanovites and the Sublime saw off Senegal, the champions of Africa. There you go, that's a report from The Guardian. We're very fond of the word Stakhanovites, which I believe is the embodiment of a sort of Russian stoic effort, if my history degree taught me anything. Or was it politics? The Metro now, here we go. 3 Lions are set for World Cup quarter-final clash with France. England roared into the World Cup quarter-finals with a 3-0 win over Senegal and now face a thrilling clash with reigning champions France. After a nervy 30 minutes, Jordan Henderson and captain Harry Kane fired home twice in 6 minutes before half-time, with teenage sensation Jude Bellingham, who's only 19, playing a crucial part in both goals. That's always good, isn't it? When you've got a tournament, when there's a new, fresh face, when you break new talent, that's always a good sign. Top scorers say the eye. England face France in battle for the Final Four. Energy firms, meanwhile, target homes in fuel poverty. 500,000 households are so deeply in debt over their energy bills that gas and electricity giants were granted the right to force them onto controversial prepayment meters in the past year. An eye investigation reveals major increases in this contentious utility warrants policy being issued against the UK's poorest families as the cost of living crisis deepens. Magistrates in one court granted almost 500 orders in under 4 minutes as a debt agent representing major energy firms dialed in by phone and insisted no one on the debt list was vulnerable. The Sun next. Glee 3 Kings now bring on France. And Ace races home from Qatar, a story we told you about earlier. Raheem raid terror. Raheem Sterling's family would appear to have been the victims of an armed burglary at home, whilst, of course, he was abroad in Qatar. He's on his way back, and we wish the family well. Financial Times, Brussels promises help for companies to offset impact of US green subsidies. And Sunak's £1.4 billion Brexit Opportunities Fund for Business rebadges existing cash. There you go, a negative headline about Brexit, which is very much the theme of my Big Opinion monologue, which I'm delighted to say Carl from our digital team has crafted into a very excellent video, which is now going viral as we speak. This is Mark Dolan tonight, the home of viral videos. Right Said Fred were on the programme last night. They went viral. Our Big Opinion monologue about a woke group trying to cancel Christmas, that went viral. This is where it's happening, folks. We tackle the big stories with big angles and big opinions. Of course, I couldn't do any of it without you. Let's get the views now of my panel to those big newspaper stories. We have Adrian Hayes. We also have Hilary Freeman and Linda Jubilee. All esteemed journalists and commentators in their own right, properly commenting. I should say qualified to comment on the big stories today. Right, let's talk about this interesting story. Anger at Tory claims that strikes aid Putin. Nadim Zahawi has told NHS workers not to strike because that helps Russia. Linda, that's an interesting angle and not a very obvious one to take.
No, I think it's... actually, I've got a lot of time for Nazim Zahawi, and I met him fairly recently at a dinner. I think he's a very admirable man, but I think that's...
Great life story as well.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy.
He arrived in the country
He arrived
aged
in this
9?
country aged 9 or 10 as an Iraqi refugee.
No English?
He spoke no English. He didn't speak any English when he got to school, and he learnt within 8 months. He's a highly impressive, highly organised man. But I think this kind of thing's so manipulative, he should never have done it. I don't know why.
Hasn't he got a point? If everyone gets a pay rise, we will stoke inflation. That's good news for Russia.
I think it's emotional blackmail, though, to tell health service workers that they're actually feeding stuff into Putin's agenda is a stretch, and it's manipulative. You don't have to talk that way to make your point, and he shouldn't have done it.
However, Hillary, these pay rises are inflationary, and inflation is bad for the country. So it's not in the national interest, is it?
Well, no, but this is not something that's just happened. This predates the Ukraine war. The way that nurses should have been paid a lot more a long time ago, and things have happened. I mean, I remember a few years ago that when you trained to be a nurse, you got paid 30 grand a year just to do training while you did your training. Now you have to get into debt in order to train to be a nurse. So things like that have made this situation, and it's really
it's a real terms pay cut over the last decade, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Even if they get sort of 5-6%, they're still down on where they might be.
Yeah, and we've got nurses going to food banks, and that should not be happening.
But will this message land? I mean, could that register with the public what Zahawi is saying? That essentially get public opinion against anyone going on strike, pointing out that it threatens Britain's national security almost.
I think he might have more luck if he tried to get people against the train drivers or the postmen than nurses.
Yeah.
People support nurses. We were all clapping for nurses a couple of years ago, and suddenly they're supposed to be the enemy because they want a bit more money. I don't think that's going to work at all.
Is this just naked politics here, Adrian?
Yeah, look, it's clutching at straws. In fact, there's a part of the Putin angle. Public support for this war is reducing, and I think they're getting a little bit desperate now, thinking how, the money... We talk about the government needs money, and we've spoken before on this show about net zero and about HS2, but the Ukraine war is costing a lot of money. Public support's leaving, so it's just trying to get some support there. But on the key about strikes, look, I'm a first responder. The South Central Ambulance Service, so I'm part of the NHS, but don't get me speaking about the NHS because, again, I keep saying it so many times, been on here, we need politicians with courage, and we haven't. They are just too cowardly to do the reforms that's needed to make
to call out where the NHS is failing. We love the frontline workers, the nurses, the doctors. They do a great job.
We do, but I wouldn't say, the nurses get all the praise, everything, but there's radiographers, there's porters, there's data analysts, there's lots of things.
Canteen workers, cleaners.
Of course, so let's not just idolise the nurses. I mean, they do a great job, we know this, and they are overworked. But this whole institution, it's been spoken about on GB News so many times, it needs a complete,
radical change.
Radical change.
What would that look like, do you think?
Well, it's got to stop looking American. Let's look at the German model, the French model. There's ways and means, mix private, mix national health. So I would personally, even paying to see a doctor, look, come on, coffee shops are, £2 to see a doctor. It would save all the waste, the time wasting, and actually get doctors back to seeing patients. It's a very little sum.
That's a fair point, and certainly worth the debate. Sicker and poorer. Report reveals Britain's widening health divide. This in The Guardian, Hillary. Economic activity because of sickness is at its highest level since records began. So this is a real worry, right? Here's the stat. 2.5 million Brits inactive because of their poor health, but are working age. So they could work but can't, as it were.
This is very, very worrying. I think some of this is probably down to long COVID as well. I know several people who've got long COVID and who can't work as a result of that. But yes, people are so poor, they can't see doctors, they can't afford healthy food, they can't heat their homes, and we are, poor are getting a lot poorer, and it is a really, really scary thing. We were talking before about Glasgow, I think it's Glasgow, where the average lifespan of a man is like 58.
58. Chichester, it's 83. Yeah. And these figures aren't the
newest
but
I don't know if I'd want to live 83 years in Chichester.
I don't know.
There's not a lot going on there, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, but I want a quiet life.
I'd be straight up to Glasgow.
Got some bus.
Go out with a bang.
No. I'd quite like a quiet life.
I feel very bad.
But I think this health divide is really, really important.
Yeah.
And the problem is that as we become an older population, the situation becomes more and more serious because we've made enormous strides in the care of cancer patients and heart patients. We're now dealing with a load of degenerative diseases that go on for decades after we used to retire at 60 and die at 65. Now we've got decades where we have to manage everybody's health, and it's looking pitiful.
Look after them, pay their pensions.
But look, as someone who's obsessed with health, fitness and nutrition, it's such a travesty. And I agree, there's a huge divide between North and South, but we've got to get back to teaching kids at schools, home economics, nutrition.
Cooking.
Cooking. We were speaking about cooking outside,
All right,
We're not, instead of diversity, inequality and equity and all these woke issues, let's get back to something.
And I think the reason why that matters is because so much of this illness, and by the way, I sympathise with anyone that's struggling with ill health, because in the end, even if it's lifestyle related, I think you're the victim of a very toxic food environment in which we exist. But you look at type 2 diabetes now, I think approximately 4 million people have that in this country. And that's a disease that does not need to exist. It's predominantly lifestyle related. Not type 1, but type 2 is. Because if it's the processed fast food, you tend to get the high BMI, and that's when you get the type 2.
The overdose of carbohydrates, I know you're passionate about this as well.
Yeah, well, we didn't have type 2 in the 50s, did we?
No, we didn't. It was the food, FDA, the demonising of fat and making carbohydrates and sugars, the power of big food corporations. Yeah. There's another angle of this story,
and also, we let food companies feed us now rather than farmers.
Yeah.
So everything's in a box and in a package or delivered, rather than just a piece of meat, some eggs, cheese...
I mean, most people wouldn't know what a real chicken looks like. It's wrapped in cling film. But no, there's a lot of sickness. There's another issue on this, which I know GB News have covered quite the excess death arguments, which we probably won't go into tonight. But this purely on this story.
They're very high at the moment, aren't they?
They are.
Higher, I think, than they were during the pandemic.
Way higher, way higher. And I know Mark Stein's covering it, Dan's covering it, you've covered as well, and there's hidden things that's behind that as well.
Well, what do you think those hidden things are?
Well, I think there's... You want my opinion?
Yeah. No one gets cancelled, not on my watch.
Dr. Asim Malhotra will actually say it more than anyone. I mean, we've got, in my opinion, looking at all the data, and I read everything, the vaccine damages, injuries, maiming, it's huge. And I think we're only at the tip of the iceberg, very sadly. I hope I'm wrong. But diabetes, heart circulation, diabetes. Ricky Ponting just collapsed with the heart failure the other day, just a CPR issue. It's prevalent, it's everywhere.
And you can't, one can't say definitively what it means, but it raises a question mark. And there are top medics, including the Chief Medical Officer of Florida, who has said, don't vaccinate your kids, right? This guy is not some quack on the internet. He's the Chief Medical Officer of Florida, who's spoken out. I think the whole point about the vaccines is that if we hadn't had the tyranny, the coercion, it wouldn't be a problem. But because so many people were forced or guilt-tripped into having it, or indeed for fear of losing their income, had to have it. And I think there'll be a day of reckoning. But I should add that the government are very confident that the vaccines are 100% or extremely safe, tested, all the rest of it. So I guess it's open for debate. Hillary?
Well, we could be like China, though, couldn't we, where people haven't been vaccinated and then they're stuck still. There isn't a simple answer. But I think with vaccination, I know this we've kind of gone off on a tangent here, but...
That's OK.
But, bring it on. Vaccinations.
There is no...
last week I had flu in that arm, COVID in that arm.
I did too.
Absolutely.
That's quite greedy. Fine.
You're like Pete... What was he? Pete, that guy from Baby Shambles. Pete Doherty. Right.
Yeah. Oh, no. Well, I've had more flattering things said about me, I must say.
I take it all back.
I like him. Anyway. But yeah, with vaccination, there have always been side effects of vaccinations, but there has never been vaccination on such a huge scale. So, of course, there's going to be more side effects because there's more people being vaccinated at the same time. So I think I'm very, very wary of conspiracy theories here. So,
well, look, that's it. What I do is I defer to all of your opinions, and I think that's what would have been so lovely for 2.5 years, is for Adrian to say what he thinks, you to say what you think, Hillary, you to say what you think, Linda, and wouldn't the world be a better place that we can sort of have our different views and then make a judgment off our own bat. And that's what will always happen on my watch here on Mark Dolan tonight. So fascinating conversation. We'll get to more of the papers. Next up, after the break, I've got the Daily Telegraph The Mirror and The Times. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Welcome back to Mark Dolan tonight. Now, folks, have we got the papers ready and lined up? Can we do this, Holly? Yes, we can. Let's have a look at the Daily Telegraph. Rail unions refuse to save Christmas. RMT rejects an 8% offer and presses on with walkouts that threaten to wreck the holiday plans of millions. Albanians could be banned from making modern slavery claims to stay in Britain, and force tech giants to give us access to our children's accounts, say bereaved families. The Times now, Met Office braced for lightning strikes as pay storm gathers. Lions roar through to the quarter-final, and midlife health checks go digital. Patients will answer a questionnaire and take a blood sample at home instead of visiting the GP. And last but not least, the Daily Mirror. Now for the French. Dream world, England in quarter-finals, but star Sterling flies home after family's burglary terror. There you go. Brilliant stories across the paper. And, of course, apart from that very sad story about Raheem Sterling, we wish his family well. Great news for England. And, of course, we'll bring you plenty of reaction to the next game against France in a few days' time. Now, let's react to some of the other big stories of the day. And we all love this particular tale. So let's get our teeth straight into it. And it is all about school and toilets. Because let me tell you about children and human rights. A Bristol school will not allow students to use a toilet during class, and some have said it's a breach of human rights. This ban has left parents outraged, and kids are only able to use the loo at break or at lunchtime or at the end of the day. The school has taken measures in response to students' and parents' requests, but should they tell the school to bog off? Is going to the toilet a human right, or is this school taking the pee? What do you think, Linda?
I think... when I read this story, I couldn't actually believe it. Personally, when I can remember back to when I was at primary school, I never used to leave the classroom to go to the toilet. I mean, it just didn't happen. So I don't understand what the fuss is about. If a child wants to go to the toilet, you let them out, they go to the toilet. In the school in question, there's one in reception, go and use the toilet, come back in the classroom, open the others at regular intervals. I can't see what the argument's all about, really.
Well, my suspicion, Linda, is that this is a very good school with high standards, and what they might have noticed, reading between the lines, is that sometimes the kids use the toilet as an excuse to have a bit of a break. They're probably gone for ages. They disturb the other students. Then they come back. Then someone else has to go off to the loo. And it's like bloody Piccadilly Circus. That would be my guess.
Well, then I think if it's a good school, they should introduce some structure and some discipline and stop that happening.
Yeah. Well, perhaps, but isn't that what they're doing with this rule? By denying loo breaks during class, they're saying, look, sort yourself out before
Yeah,
this.
I don't think you need to go that far. I think you just need to get kids to understand what structure's all about, what discipline is all about. If one of them wants to go to the toilet, let them go to the toilet. They can use the one in reception.
Can I go to the toilet now?
I actually need the loo right now. But yeah, I don't think this is that uncommon. It's pretty much the same at my daughter's school. And she ended up with a UTI because of this.
Really?
A lot, and the kids don't drink enough because they're worried that they're not going to be able to use the toilet when they need to go.
Oh, wow.
And at primary school, they worry about having accidents because some of them still have accidents when they're 6, 7.
I think primary school is understandable, but during secondary, I mean, do you not find that these young adults, when they go to the cinema to watch a Marvel movie, they've normally sorted out their wee-wee beforehand?
Oh, no, that's right. Secondary school, but for secondary school, for girls, for example, you know, if they're having a period, they might need to change their tampon or something, they might have flooding, all those kinds of issues for girls.
You must, former military, you must have weed into some very unusual devices.
Very personal question, Mark. I have indeed, particularly on trekking to the North Pole. That's at minus 60. That was
really? How did you have a wee in the North Pole?
Well, it freezes, you snap it off, and there's a spear to kill a polar bear. But I shouldn't say that because I might get cancelled.
We caught you earlier trying to use one of the GB News mugs. What a disgrace.
By the way,
Michael Portillo will be using that next week.
I want to thank GB News for making this like a Qatari desert in here. I am burning up here.
It is tasty.
But yes, going on the issue, let's get back to the issue in question. Look, as you said, right, you say, cinemas, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, some of these films. Top Gun too, particularly. But with all the adverts. So I don't think it's too much to ask kids to have a toilet break.
Let me give you 2 in 2 now, OK? Producer Holly doesn't think it's possible, but I think we can squeeze 2 stories in before we go.
OK.
First of all, a great discussion about how long an engagement should be. Of course, it's quite traditional, isn't it, to get engaged before you actually get married. Bobby Davro has tied the knot with Vicky Wright. We wish him every happiness. They've been together for 12 years. But the question is, do you need to bite the bullet and get married a year after engagement? What's the right length? Hilary, you're an agony aunt.
I don't think there is a right length, but I think, you know, getting engaged, it's very nice, you know, give someone a ring, say we're getting married, but really it's just a statement of intent to get married, isn't it? And if you're going to be engaged for years and years and years and years, what are you saying? Are you saying you don't really want to get married?
I think it can be a bit rude.
I mean, Vanessa Feltz has been engaged for 15 years or
That's
something,
ridiculous.
Come on, Ben, get cracking. I think that some ladies are like, the clock is ticking.
Absolutely. You need to put your foot down with some of these men. And the fact of the matter is, I think a year's a reasonable length of time.
A year?
Yeah, absolutely.
Give it a year.
I think engagement's lost its value nowadays.
Yeah.
It's not what it used to mean.
Oh, no,
in fact,
I
it's become a social media... Look, we just got engaged. I'm
I agree. I think
It's almost like a
like
publicity stunt. Right, finally, Indiana Jones is here, number 5. Harrison Ford, brilliant actor.
Yeah.
He still looks great.
80?
He's 80.
He's
He looks,
80.
and McCartney's 80. It turns out, it gives all of us hope, doesn't it, Adrian?
You don't stop when you get old, you get old when you stop. One of my favourite quotes of all time. But I would look at film sequels, you're going to ask the best ones. I always look at the ones where the follow-up was better than the first. And there's 2 examples I can give you. Terminator 2 was better than Terminator 1. And I think Top Gun Maverick is actually better than the first one. I loved it. I've seen
and Godfather 2.
Didn't see that one, but yeah.
Yes. Also, I think Toy Story 2 might edge Toy Story 1 as well.
Yeah, so
Lots of emotion.
That's a good ingredient of a good sequel.
Brilliant stuff. Briefly, your favourite franchise, couple of seconds?
Oh, God. Bond.
Yes, James Bond. That's what I was going to say.
Thanks for your company. I'm back on Friday at 9.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debate.